when I was asked to speak, one of the challenges is just the unfortunate breadth of violations that have occurred over the decades. So today I want to actually tell the stories and just highlight just a few of the victims of the decades of impunity, to put a name on the abuses, the names of the people who have been victimized in the name of, I guess, the world's largest democracy. These abuses happen to be under various pieces of legislation which so many human rights organizations have documented, like AFSPA. However, there are any number of pretexts that can be used to justify this impunity, including, frankly, just not caring. So the first one I want to highlight is someone from a group of 3 men from 2010, Riaz, Shehzad Ahmed Khan, and Mohammed Shafi. Now, they were offered, at the time, 2010, they were offered 50,000 rupees, which is the equivalent of about $30 US per day, to be porters for the Indian Army in Jammu and Kashmir. They left their homes gladly and headed for an army camp, but they were murdered. Police actually investigated, and they found a horrific tale of cold-blooded murder. The army had, quote unquote, purchased the 3 men for the equivalent of $2,500 US and a few bottles of alcohol. The soldiers then killed them and falsely identified them as militants and planted weapons at a site in the Machil sector of the line of control that divides the control between India and Pakistan. It's the de facto border. I hate to even use that term, but that's what it is. So that the army unit could claim credit and rewards. Now, I highlight this case, but actually you may be surprised to note that in November 2014, the Indian Army reported that a military court actually convicted 5 soldiers and sentenced them to life in prison for faking an armed encounter and executing 3 innocent villagers. These 3 innocent villagers. So there was justice in this case, right? Well, unfortunately, no. In July 2017, a military tribunal suspended the punishment of these Rajputana rifle soldiers, and of course, they are still free. So even that one case, and I'm just highlighting that one case where they actually almost had this justice, it was overturned. Now, there are cases like those of Riaz, Shehzad Ahmed Khan, and Mohammed Shafi who did seem to at least have gotten that murder conviction, right? But thousands of other families will seemingly never see justice for the loss of their loved ones in human rights abuses, and we just simply cannot forget them. Another example is, it was widely publicized, is this what's known, I guess is a very euphemistic term known as encounter killings. So 5 men from Pathrabal who were identified by the police and the army as the militants responsible for the horrific massacre of 36 Sikhs in Chatterji in Kashmir way back in 2000. These 5 men were then killed in that supposed armed encounter. Forensic tests ordered by the state government later showed these 5 men to be local villagers who were innocent of the massacre. However, in 2014, 14 years later, the army said it was closing the case for lack of evidence against the accused army officers. So not only have the victims of the massacre of the 36 Sikhs in Chatterji never resolved, the 5 who were killed in response also their cases were never adjudicated. Now, as Meenakshi Ganguly, who is the South Asia Director for Human Rights Watch, said recently, maybe a couple of years ago, security forces have long operated with impunity in Kashmir and past army investigations have been focused more on shielding those responsible for abuse than providing justice. Next person I'd like to talk about is someone who was 17 years old at the time, Javed Ahmed Magre. On the evening of April 30th, 2003, he was studying in his room, as 17-year-olds should be doing for their exams. The next morning, he was gone. His father asked a soldier standing outside his home that he needed to find Javed, but the soldiers told him no and go back inside. However, down the road, both of Javed's parents could see blood stains and a tooth lying on the pavement. Neighbors came out and they demanded to know where Javed was because they see evidence that he was at least injured. An army officer then said, he's at this police station. At the police station, they tell the parents that he was at one hospital and then he was transferred to another hospital where the 17-year-old boy had died. The police stated in a first information report, an FIR, that Javed was not involved in quote unquote anti-national activity or militancy. There was mounds of evidence that an officer of the Assam Rifles was implicated. Now, the Assam Rifles is one of the many sort of Indian paramilitary security forces that are in Kashmir. The Jammu and Kashmir government actually asked that the officer from the Assam Rifles be prosecuted in 2008. But 3 years later, in 2011, sanction to prosecute was denied under the AFSPA, the Armed Forces Special Powers Act. The sanction to prosecute was denied. And to add to the absolute despair, Javed's family were never officially informed of this decision to give it immunity or, frankly, impunity for the murder. Now, I'd like to talk about one final person. And the thing is that I could talk about thousands of people, but of course there's time constraints, but I just wanted to highlight these three as examples. Final person I'd like to talk about is about Mazhar Ahmad Mir. He was subjected to an enforced disappearance in 2003 and believed to have been extrajudicially executed. The police actually, in 2003, filed murder charges of kidnapping, evidence tampering, and other charges against a captain in the 23rd Rashtriya Rifles, which is yet another type of security, another paramilitary security force operating, as well as 2 local informers, following an investigation into the disappearance of Mazhar Ahmad Mir. And of course, the Indian government denied sanction in the case, but it took them 6 years to do so. In 2009, they justified their decision on the grounds that, quote, the allegation was motivated by vested interests to malign the image of security forces. And so the cases of this impunity, what happens is that we have a circumstance where there's just, to use the term basically a fire hose of violations, and these other cases get forgotten, except by those families, the families and friends and other loved ones who have to deal with the aftermath without any sense of justice. Now in 2015, we did a report in Amnesty International where we documented a widespread view that those responsible for human rights violations will never be brought to justice, as I've been saying. And I can't really disagree. As the brother of Mazhar Ahmad Mir stated, quote, and he said it so well, the whole system is corrupt. We're fighting for the guilty to be put behind bars, but it is impossible. The main aim is that the guilty should be punished so that no one else has to suffer for this. And so we just cannot forget the victims of these human rights violations of the past, because it really impacts what's happening now, where Indian authorities have repeatedly denied justice on a wide variety of grounds. And we also can never forget the families and friends who will never see their loved ones. And we must demand accountability and justice for those perpetrating these abuses. And we must keep the pressure on in our advocacy work within the United States and in other places to really push the Indian government to finally end this impunity. Thank you.